Picture this. You're in a crowded room, and everyone's focused on the loudest person demanding attention. But there's someone else there, someone quiet, observing from the shadows. Someone who's been underestimated for far too long. That person might just be the most formidable force in the entire space. What I'm about to share will fundamentally shift how you view highly sensitive individuals forever. Carl Jung, the legendary psychologist, uncovered something profound about the human mind. He revealed that within each of us exists both illumination and darkness. And nowhere is this duality more striking than in those we call empaths. Society has gotten it completely wrong about empathy. We've been conditioned to see emotional sensitivity as fragility. But Jung's groundbreaking research exposed something far more complex. Something that should make manipulators everywhere think twice. By the time we're finished here, you'll understand why underestimating a highly sensitive person is one of the most dangerous mistakes anyone can make. Jung understood that the human mind operates across multiple dimensions. We wear masks in public, hiding our authentic selves behind carefully crafted facades. But what occurs when someone with exceptional emotional radar finally drops that pretense? Jung's discoveries about our hidden psychological depths will leave you speechless. Highly sensitive individuals exist in what Jung described as the space between extremes. They experience emotions with incredible depth, yet they've mastered the art of containment. They can see through lies and manipulation, but they choose to believe in humanity's capacity for goodness. This isn't foolishness. Jung called it the transcendent function, the remarkable ability to hold opposing realities without breaking apart. But here's where things become truly dangerous, and why those who exploit others should be genuinely afraid. Jung observed that the most psychologically integrated people are those who have confronted their shadow side and emerged victorious. Empaths, through constant betrayal and emotional abuse, are thrust into this integration process far earlier and more intensively than others. They don't just understand light. They have intimate knowledge of darkness because they've been dragged through it. The narcissist looks at the empath's compassion and makes a fatal error in judgment. They assume they're dealing with weakness, someone they can control and manipulate at will. But Jung discovered that those who lead with their hearts often possess the most unshakable psychological foundations. Why is this true? Because they've had to forge these foundations to survive the storms thrown at them. Pay close attention to what happens next. This is the moment when everything reverses completely. Jung's theory of individuation states that every person must eventually face their true self. For most people, this confrontation happens slowly, if it happens at all. But for empaths who've endured betrayal, this process accelerates at lightning speed. The agony becomes a catalyst for what Jung termed psychological rebirth. Here's Jung's insight that most people completely miss. Emotional sensitivity isn't weakness disguised as strength. It's advanced pattern recognition operating at the highest level. Empaths don't simply feel emotions. They dissect them, understand them, archive them in their psyche. Every act of manipulation, every deception, every emotional assault gets stored away, not as resentment, but as invaluable intelligence. And when that intelligence reaches a tipping point, you witness what Jung called the emergence of the authentic self. And it's absolutely unstoppable. Jung made a fascinating discovery. The most profound transformations don't happen during peaceful times. They happen during crisis. He termed this enantiodromia, the natural tendency for situations to flip into their opposites when pushed beyond their limits. The patient empath becomes immovable. The generous one becomes selective. The forgiving one becomes final. This transformation isn't about becoming heartless or vindictive. Jung understood that genuine strength emerges when someone integrates their shadow side. When they acknowledge their capacity for boundaries, for refusal, for walking away without explanation, the empath doesn't lose their compassion. They develop an unbreakable spine. But what happens next will absolutely revolutionize your understanding of psychological warfare. Jung made a crucial distinction between unconscious reaction and conscious response. Most people operate from their psychological wounds. They strike back. They seek vengeance. They attempt to inflict the same pain they've experienced. But the transformed empath operates from what Jung called conscious choice. They don't need to destroy their betrayer because they've already won the most important battle, the war within themselves. Jung believed that the greatest triumph isn't defeating others, but conquering the parts of yourself that would reduce you to their level. And this is precisely when the narcissist realizes they've made a catastrophic miscalculation. Jung observed that manipulators depend on predictable emotional responses. They need you to chase them, to justify yourself, to fight desperately for the relationship. But when an empath achieves what Jung called psychological autonomy, they become completely immune to these manipulative tactics. They stop participating in the game altogether. Jung discovered that the most powerful position in any relationship dynamic is detachment born from understanding, not withdrawal born from fear. The awakened empath doesn't retreat because they're wounded. They step away because they can finally see with perfect clarity. What unfolds next will completely redefine your understanding of power dynamics in human relationships. Jung's research on psychological types revealed that empaths possess what he called dominant feeling function. This isn't emotional instability or weakness. It's sophisticated emotional intelligence operating at master level. They can read subtext, sense incongruence, detect manipulation before it's even fully executed. But here's the twist Jung identified. When this emotional intelligence merges with hard-earned wisdom from betrayal, something unprecedented emerges. The empath stops being reactive and becomes strategic. They no longer operate from a place of pain. They operate from a position of power. The transformation that follows has a specific name in Jung's work, and it's absolutely revolutionary. Jung termed it the transcendent function. The capacity to hold tension without shattering, to perceive truth without becoming bitter, to choose thoughtful response over impulsive reaction. The empath, who has been refined in the crucible of betrayal, develops this transcendent function to levels most people never achieve. They become what Jung called individuated, complete within themselves. They no longer require external validation to confirm their worth. They no longer need others' approval to trust their own perceptions. They stop depending on anyone who fails to appreciate their depth. But here's the element that will send shivers through your entire being. Jung identified a phenomenon he called psychological mirroring. Empaths naturally reflect back whatever others project onto them. But when an empath has been betrayed repeatedly, something fundamental shifts. They stop reflecting and start revealing. They see through the charm. the manipulation, the hollow apologies. They observe the patterns unfolding with crystalline clarity, and instead of absorbing the dysfunction, they begin to mirror it back, not with malice, but with unvarnished truth. And truth, Jung discovered, is the most devastating weapon against deception. The next phase is what Jung called the return of the repressed, and it transforms everything. Jung understood that when someone suppresses their authentic power for too long, it eventually surfaces. Not in chaos, but in absolute clarity. The empath, who has been accommodating, understanding, and endlessly patient, suddenly becomes unmovable. They don't argue their position anymore. They simply decide. They don't justify their choices. They act. They don't attempt to repair what's fundamentally broken. They remove themselves from the toxic equation entirely. This isn't cruelty. It's Jung's concept of individuation in motion. And here's where the psychology becomes absolutely captivating. Jung believed that the shadow contains not just our darkness, but our unrealized potential. For empaths, this shadow often holds their capacity for firm boundaries, their ability to refuse unreasonable demands, their power to walk away from toxicity. Betrayal forces them to integrate this shadow, to reclaim these aspects of themselves they'd kept hidden away. Jung discovered that this integration doesn't diminish someone's compassion. It makes them more discerning. They don't stop caring about others. They become more selective about where that precious care is invested. They recognize their empathy as sacred, not something to be distributed carelessly to anyone who asks. What emerges from this process is what Jung called the individuated self, and it's absolutely unstoppable. Jung stated that the most dangerous individuals aren't those who act from unconscious wounds, but those who have transformed their wounds into wisdom. The awakened empath embodies this transformation perfectly. They've journeyed to the depths of human cruelty and emerged not shattered, but refined. They understand manipulation because they've survived it. They recognize gaslighting because they've escaped it. They can identify emotional vampires because they've been drained by them. This isn't paranoia or cynicism. It's what Jung called hard-earned discernment. And here's the moment when everything shifts permanently. Jung's theory of psychological development identifies a crucial moment when an individual stops seeking external completion and becomes whole within themselves. For the betrayed empath, this moment represents both liberation and revolution. They stop trying to convince others of their value. They stop explaining their boundaries to those who refuse to respect them. They stop apologizing for having needs and standards. They achieve what Jung called psychological sovereignty, complete ownership of their emotional landscape. But the final transformation is what Jung called the return to the self. And it's absolutely magnificent to witness. Jung discovered that true strength isn't the absence of sensitivity. It's sensitivity that has been refined by wisdom. The fully awakened empath embodies this paradox flawlessly. They feel deeply but love selectively. They understand completely but engage cautiously. They forgive fully but never forget the lessons learned. Jung said that the most integrated individuals are those who can hold both their light and shadow in conscious awareness simultaneously. The transformed empath has mastered being gentle with those who deserve it and firm with those who require it. They've perfected what Jung called appropriate response. And here's the final element that makes them completely untouchable. Jung believed that the highest form of psychological development occurs when someone no longer needs others to complete them. The awakened empath reaches this state not through isolation, but through integration. They become whole, not by shutting out the world, but by choosing their place in it with careful consideration. They no longer rescue people who enjoy drowning in their own drama. They no longer chase those who consistently run away from genuine connection. They no longer pour their light into black holes disguised as people. They've learned what Jung called the art of conscious relationship, engaging only where there's mutual respect, reciprocity, and authentic care. The end result is something Jung called the individuated empath, and they represent the most powerful force you'll ever encounter. Jung said that when someone has integrated their shadow, faced their demons, and emerged whole, they become what he termed a force of nature. Not destructive, but unstoppable. Not aggressive, but absolutely certain of their worth and boundaries. The fully awakened empath doesn't seek revenge because they've transcended the need for it. They don't need to prove their worth because they know it intimately. They don't fear solitude because they've learned to be excellent company for themselves. They become what Jung called psychologically complete individuals who have transformed their deepest wounds into their greatest strengths. They are dangerous not because they attack, but because they cannot be manipulated, controlled, or broken again. And that, according to Carl Jung's lifetime of research, is the most terrifying thing a narcissist can face. Someone who has learned to love themselves as fiercely as they once loved others. The empath's journey from victim to sovereign isn't just personal transformation. It's what Jung called the hero's journey of the psyche. They descend into darkness, face their shadows, integrate their power, and emerge not just healed, but wholly. Jung discovered that suffering, when consciously embraced and psychologically processed, becomes the raw material for profound wisdom. The empath who has walked through fire doesn't just survive the experience. They become the light that guides others out of their own darkness. They are living proof of Jung's greatest insight, that within every wound lies the seed of transcendence, and within every betrayal lies the invitation to become more authentic, more powerful, and more whole than ever before. This is the psychology of the awakened empath. And once you truly understand it, you'll never underestimate the quiet strength of someone who has learned to transform their pain into power, their wounds into wisdom, and their deepest suffering into their greatest strength. The next time you encounter someone who seems too quiet, too observant, too willing to step back rather than fight, remember this: they might not be weak or defeated. They might be the most psychologically integrated person in the room. Someone who has walked through hell and emerged with their soul intact and their power fully realized. I hope this exploration has opened your eyes to the incredible strength that exists within sensitivity. If this resonated with you, make sure to subscribe to Sacred Patterns and share this message with someone who needs to hear it. The world needs more people who understand that true power often wears the quiet mask of wisdom.